Hi, I'm Sue Stockdale, and welcome to episode 129 of the Access to Inspiration podcast, the show where you can be inspired by people who may be unlike you. Whether it's a farmer or a financier, we hope their stories and insights will inspire you to reflect on the world differently. In today's episode, we delve into the heart of the real estate business, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Dana Frank, whose family's journey with TD Frank Family Properties offers a compelling testament to the power of familial bonds in overcoming challenges and achieving shared goals. Throughout the years, Dana's family has faced numerous obstacles, from financial hardships to property management issues. Yet Dana's emphasis on instilling values of hard work, perseverance, and responsibility into herself and her children illustrates how a unified family can achieve long-term success and sustainability. Remember, you can read along with the transcription of this episode as you listen at accesstoinspiration.org. Welcome to the podcast, Dana. It's lovely to speak to you today.
Thanks, Sue. I'm thrilled to be here.
Dana, I know 25 years ago you took over the reins of the family business as General Managing Partner of TD Frank Family Properties.
That's correct.
So I'd love to find out that backstory of how did the business start up?
Our family history in 3 segments. The first segment was 1950. My father came of age, 18 years old, in Detroit, Michigan. His options were limited. It was a time of redlining, segregation, Jim Crow laws that were said to be separate but equal. And my father's options were very limited. My grandfather told him, Chrysler and Ford are hiring. Take one of those good jobs on the assembly line. And my father just looked at his friends that were putting in double shifts starting at 2, 3, 4 in the morning and coming home at the end of 2 weeks with barely enough of a paycheck to put a decent meal on the table. So my father, I call these individuals fire starters. Daddy left Detroit. He was a budding drummer. He packed his van with his dreams and his drums, and he came to Seattle, Washington. And he just fell in love with the landscape. I mean, it's very beautiful here. And he was blown away by Mount Rainier and the Olympics and Lake Washington and Puget Sound. And he just decided to dig in and make this his roots. So he was playing at nightclubs. He lied about his age. He got into the nightclub business. He met a patron, and the guy explained that he had a house for sale. And my father, like I said, was only 18 years old. Of course, he didn't have any money. But he struck a deal and worked off the down payment, teaching the owner's kid how to play drums, doing manual labor. And he bought his first house. And that improbable decision, in order to make the $48 monthly note in 1950, he rented out rooms to his fellow students from the University of Washington, where he was attending classes. And that was a real pivotal time for my father, and he recognized the value of owning real estate. And so he and my mother met a few years later. She was actually a beauty queen, and she was in a contest called Miss Bronze, and Daddy was on the drums, and she won the prize money in the Miss Bronze contest and my father's heart, and got together. And both of them, I call them again fire starters. They started buying property, and for 19 years they bought property without any bank funding because of redlining, and there was no loans available to Black families then. So until Liberty Bank, which was a Black bank, gave them their first loan in 1969. So the real estate, I was born into it. There was really just no other option. When I was born, I have 2 older sisters, and my father just always instilled in us that you can either work for yourself or work building someone else's dream. But either way, you're going to be working. And the second part of my family business, as I said, it was 3 parts, is in 1989, after 32 years, my parents unfortunately divorced. So that was a real pivotal point. I have a sister that had moved to Germany, another sister who really didn't want to be a part of the business. And I just understood the importance of legacy and what they had created. And so I partnered with my mother. It was a really difficult time. It was the 1990s, and we were in a recession. And the courts had ordered a receivership to take over the properties. And so what my mother and I inherited was really a mess. And I'll talk more about my process of what we did to resurrect the business. I had to go to the banks, and they said, sell. And I said, if we sell, we lose everything. And so I went to a banker and negotiated a moratorium, which was basically a stay on paying the mortgages for a year. That allowed me to utilize the funds to rehab, renovate, and upgrade the properties. And we were back in business. So that was 1990. And then by 1990, 3, I had my firstborn son, who's now 30, and he's running the family business. So I say we beat the odds that say only 12% of family businesses make it to the third generation. And I'm super proud. I'll be a grandmother for the first time in October. So that history of knowing that this child coming into the world, as I'll walk through buildings that my parents bought in 1950, that's legacy. And it's that adage that says, plant a tree today, even though you might not enjoy the shade, your children and their children will. And that's what I'm living. So feel very fortunate.
What a wonderful story. And there's lots of highs and lows in there. And certainly as I've been reading your book, tell me what your book title is.
Get Up and Get On It, a Black entrepreneur's lessons on creating legacy and wealth.
When I've been reading it, I've been really fascinated by some of the stories that you share.
Thank you.
Particularly about setting the reality of what life was like for your family way back. I think it was your great-grandmother who saved up a whole year to buy a sofa and then didn't sit on it.
Yes.
What?
That's right.
What happened there?
That's right. It was so hard to come by, and it was such a prized possession. And so she got this beautiful lemon sofa. She finally was able to get it, and then she covered it in plastic and just treasured it. After church on Sundays, the whole family would gather, and Grandma would scream, "You better not sit on the couch." I mean, it was so sad because she dies and it gets passed off to one of the needy relatives, and she never got to enjoy it. We really have been raised to enjoy it while you can.
Well, and work hard and be creative in doing what it needs to be done to get by and to move things forward.
Absolutely. And perseverance. I mean, that's it. I tell you, there have been so many days, and my mother and I in particular, my mom's 92, and that's why I love the title of my book, Get Up and Get On It, because every day she still does. And I mean, her faculties are sharper than mine. She is fit. She is remarkable when you have meaning and you have something to do and you're passionate about it. And despite the hardships, I mean, when I look at my mom, we've been through, as I said, high interest rates. I remember getting loans when they were in the low 20s, and recessions, a pandemic, being forced by laws changing where we have to operate literally as housing providers with our hands cuffed, dealing with tenants that have mental illness. There's a lot that goes into it, but I really believe that at the end of the day, it's the perseverance that sees you through.
So coming back to some of these challenges, it might be helpful to just help our listener contextualize the type of properties that you have. I understand it's about providing quality, affordable housing for your tenants.
Correct. Our units are their community. And what we feel is that it's a privilege that we're providing where people live and call home. And our best times are when people come and say, I mean, today is the 31st, and tomorrow we've got residents that are moving out that are buying their first home. And that's the thrill. I mean, we've had some residents that have lived with our family literally as long as 50 years. We get to know their children. I mean, they really become an extension of our family. And daily we engage. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that my kids and I and my mom often are at the properties, engaging with the residents, and it's just been a great journey. Yesterday, I had to call the police and run off a homeless guy that had camped out on the porch of one of the properties. You are 24/7. Oftentimes, if the hot water tank bursts in the middle of the night, you're going to get the phone call. But you also have the privilege on the other side of, I can't think of another business where strangers will put money in your bank account every month. I mean, it's so you take the good with the bad and it balances it out.
And one of the things, I'm just hearing this real sense of resourcefulness, finding ways to get things done, and also being willing to metaphorically roll up your sleeves and do it yourself if needed.
Absolutely. I tell anybody that's interested in getting in real estate, it is not a situation where you can be a passive landlord. I treat my properties like I treated raising my children. You have to be engaged and active. And I was recently honored with the American Lung Association's Outstanding Mother Award. And I said, to be an outstanding mother, you have to have outstanding children. And it's what you put in that you get back.
What a wonderful accolade. And I'm sure that also seeing your son now taking on the business is also very satisfying for you.
It is indeed. And my daughter's 23 as of yesterday, and she just graduated from Chapman College, and she's busy getting her real estate license. And I really encourage parents to engage with their children early. And you also have to find out if your children want to be a part of your business. When my son graduated from UW Foster's Business School, he spent 2 years in Chicago. And he was like, I want to go figure out what I want to do. And he went with my blessing. Of course, it was hard, but I was like, you've got to go and see this is your life. I do think that it's something that parents really need to engage with early. I grew up on the front lines with my parents because that's when they were building. And so my summers were spent cleaning apartments, and I've spent countless days putting pickets on banks, amplifying the injustice of redlining. And we were at the building phase of it, and now it's continuing the legacy.
And how do you look for other properties to invest in? So if you're still accumulating other units, how do you find them?
It's been challenging right now in the economic time that we're in with interest rates being higher. I always prefer value add buildings, whereas I'll go in and find a distressed property or one that I can create my own equity. So I'll look for properties that are in desirable upcoming neighborhoods. Like 20 years ago, I bought a building that a light rail came through. And I mean, the whole property surrounding just became super vibrant. There's a PCC and a post office and a park and the farmers market on the weekends. And you just try to find things, even if the area is transitional now, kind of have the foresight to look at what's coming. And one of the practices that I use is an acronym I call REAL. And I tell people, whatever business that they're going into, to use the REAL approach. The R is research. The foundation of any successful business is research. So if I'm looking at a building, I go in, and I personally only like to buy properties that I can drive to. I have had properties out of state. I'm in a long distance commuter marriage. My husband lives in Nashville. We own property in Arizona, but it really is a hands-on. So the research and knowing the area and anything that can impact the value is important. I also will look at units that are large, and I've gone in and I'm like, oh my God, this is an 1,100 square foot, 1 bedroom. It's got a window. We can build a closet, make it a 2 bedroom, and that automatically increases the rental income. So research is huge. The E is expand your network. I tell people all the time, back in the early 1950s, when my parents didn't have any financial means, they partnered with already established business owners in the community. These partners would put up the down payment. My parents would do the labor for their equity. As the property increased in value, they'd refinance, buy the partners out, roll it into the next deal. And by expanding your network, I mean, I'm on a plethora of organizations. I've been a board member of the Museum of Popular Culture. Paul Allen, the founder, passed away a few years ago, the co-founder of Microsoft. But through MoPop, the people that I've met, I do an annual holiday drive for Treehouse for Foster Kids. I mean, the people that I'm able to engage with, we call it March Madness here, when everybody has their luncheons to raise awareness for their causes. And the people that I've engaged with, it's a win for all. So expanding your network is huge. The A is amplifying injustice. As I've referenced, we spent many a days putting pickets on banks, and it's unfortunate, but a closed mouth does not get fed. And I always tell people, if you feel that you're being denied a loan or something and it's just not just, take it to the press, expose it, get to the why. And then the L is leverage. Leverage your relationships, leverage the relationships with the bank. When my mother and I came out of the divorce, had I listened to the bankers that told us sell, 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 I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you. But it was because I had studied and I said, I know you can give me a moratorium. You are not going to take this property that we fought this hard for. And it happened.
And again, Dana, I'm just hearing this fighting spirit. I'm just wondering whether there's a space for an F in your acronym as well. And the F, I think, is about family, because it seems to me loud and clear that family is so important. The way your family work together to help each other, to run the business, and also the family mindset that you bring to the tenants.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And it has truly been one of my life's biggest blessings, is being able to work and live with my family. We are engaged every day and we have fun. It's such a fortunate position to be in, where everybody's working towards the same cause. And when we win, we all win together.
The Access to Inspiration podcast is a free to listen to podcast, but it's not free to make. So if you're enjoying this episode, say thanks and become a supporter of Access to Inspiration to help us continue producing quality audio content for our listeners. Click on the Buy Me a Coffee link on the show notes to make a small donation and leave us a message. Feedback is a great source of energy for us. Now back to our guest. Now, one might argue that is all sounding sweetness and light, and people don't always get on along with one another all the time. They have their ups and downs. So I'm wondering how well you're able to separate business from family, because often that's what gets family businesses to not get into the third generation.
Only 12% make it. Absolutely. And that's a very true situation. And that's why I said, make sure everybody's on the same page. I mean, if my kids come to me and say, hey, mom, we're not interested, I want to be a musician or whatever, it's their life. And so from a very early age, we laid it on the table. I mean, my sisters were not interested in working in the family business. That was their choice. My one sister has lived 40 years in Germany and she loves it. I think that that's important. In our family, we were raised with it all supports the whole, and the whole is the family unit. And if you choose not to be a part of it, I mean, we still engage and get together and have holidays and birthdays and celebrations, but the family members that are involved in the family business, that's our core.
There's a strong bond there, that glue that keeps you all connected together.
Absolutely.
You also mentioned, Dana, about philanthropy and about giving back. Is that a part of your life as well?
It's one of the biggest parts of my life. I've raised my children with the saying that you can't receive with a clenched fist. And the amount that I give, I find such fulfillment in helping, especially people from marginalized backgrounds, understand that they can change the narrative despite their birth circumstances. Last summer, I coached homeless kids tennis. I'm an avid tennis player. And the joy I felt sitting here with these kids that had never even picked up a racket and just, it might be the next Venus Williams. You just never know. And that's why I always talk about finding mentors. I've had some amazing mentors in my life. So I feel it's a privilege for me to be able to give back as these people have given to me. And in my book, I share a lot of my mentor stories. I mean, one of them was the founder of J.G. Wentworth, who sold annuities at a discount. He purchased annuities, insurance annuities. And Gary Valoric is his name. And Gary has been amazing. I mean, I can still call him today and say, hey, Gary, I'm looking to refinance. What do you think about this interest rate? And he'll walk me through it. And so to whom much is given, much is required. So I find it very appealing to be able to return the favor. And like I said, for 25 years, I've hosted an annual holiday party for Treehouse for Foster Kids. And I'm like, we're going to have a holiday party anyhow. So when I invite my friends all over, I'm like, bring an unwrapped gift for kids in Treehouse and let's make someone else's spirits happy. So everybody feels good.
So the sense I get is always about thinking of more than just yourself.
Yes. It's so paramount, and especially in this day and times, especially for the younger demographics, because they're constantly looking at the television, things that we were not raised with, the gaming and the Instagram and the social media and everything. And my philosophy is that cash erodes, equity grows. Make sure every dime you spend, you understand that it's going away and it's never coming back. So invest it well. And that includes your time. So if you give your time, invest it well.
A great mantra to have. So given that I'm imagining you're pretty busy, Dana, how did you even find time or the inclination to put all your experiences down on paper and produce this book?
So the book started 27 years ago when my father passed away. My son was 3. I hadn't had my daughter yet. And I was like, how am I ever going to explain to my children who this most impactful person was in my life? My father was hysterical, and the things that he taught me, I find myself even to this day. I mean, there's not a day that he's not with me. And he would tell me things like, just because it's on your ass doesn't make it an asset. And so when I say things, I'm like, I'm my father's child. So I really sat down and I started just writing for my kids. And then my son a few years ago was like, Mom, this story is just so amazing. I really think that you ought to share it. And so we connected with Wiley Publishing, and they said, we like it not as a memoir, but as a business book, because you've got so many tools and lessons. And so I just rewrote it as a business book, but it still has so many stories, because that's the life, is the stories. So I call it an unconventional business book.
Well, there certainly were a lot of useful tips in there when I was reading it. And I loved the story that also stuck in my mind about your father's approach to taking the front door off a property when the people hadn't paid their rent. Tell me about that.
Couldn't get away with those things today, but yeah. So one resident, every month, he was the hardest one to collect from, and he would make excuses and then he would avoid us. And again, this is probably back in, the 1980s, so totally different climate. And I'm not advising this for anybody listening to do, but it was heavy Seattle, typical rainy day. And this guy had gotten away again with not paying, not answering the door, and just went completely MIA. So my father and his main contractor show up at the property at like 4 a.m, and Daddy instructs the contractor to go remove the front door. The rain is coming in sideways. I mean, it's just pounding. And so by the time that my father gets back to our home office, this guy's on the phone screaming his front door is missing. And my father, again, he had a very wicked sense of humor. He says, "Your front door is missing. Well, ain't that a coincidence? So is your rent." And I mean, the guy just loses it. And my father was quite the character.
Well, there's so many amazing and funny stories like that in your book. I found it very interesting to read. Entrepreneurs that are listening to this podcast, based on your own experience, what are some of the bits of advice you would offer to them?
I love that proverb that says, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And that's kind of why my book is entitled Get Up and Get On It. And every day I literally get up and I'm like, okay, what am I doing to move forward? And so whatever business that someone's looking at, have the plan. That's where the real acronym comes back in. Do your research. Is it going to be profitable? What are the statistics? And right now, with access to computers, there's so many programs. Like Chase Bank committed $30 billion to bridge the racial financial wealth gap. They understand that 74% of white households own a home compared to 41% of Black households. There's so much information available just by clicking on your computer. So I say, look at your plan and see what your niche might be and how you're going to make it happen. And every day, find the time to apply the time to make it happen.
Whilst planning is the bedrock of looking ahead, I also read in your book that you do spend time reflecting and checking on your progress. How do you do that?
Every day. I truly do live by the saying of something to live, something to love, and something to look forward to. And I spend a lot of time also enjoying myself at this point. As I mentioned, I'm a huge tennis player. I've got a wonderful extended family of close friends and just taking the quiet time. I'm a huge reader. I love at night. I do turn my phone off. I mean, when the residents need to reach us for an emergency, they've got my son's number. So I do take time for Dana, and you need that re-energy and that reset. And it's just like finding that time and that space in your life to say what really matters to you.
And finally, Dana, you've given us some lovely acronyms to remember, some lovely metaphors to think about. What would be another thing that you live by that really helps you to make each day work for you?
Got to go back to my book title, Get Up and Get On It. I mean, that's the first step. Just really get up. I don't care, if it's raining, sunny, snow, whatever. Just have your plan and find other mentors. I mean, when I wrote this book, I was really looking at who would resonate and who my audience was. And so the person that I sought out was Damon John. I'm like, here this kid from New York comes. He doesn't have any money. His mother backs him, the whole family, belief in family. And he went on to build FUBU, one of the largest apparel lines, and Shark Tank star. I believe in the creativity, thinking outside of the box. Don't worry about getting told no. I get told no many times a day. I might take 9 no's to get that one yes, but it's coming. And I think the other thing is allow yourself to be Teflon. People take things so personally. Just let it roll off. It's coming. Stay the course and it's coming.
Well, I feel I better get up and get on it now to put some of the things you've talked about today, Dana, into practice. It's been lovely to speak to you. If people want to find out more about your book and about your background, how might they do that?
Thanks, Sue. The book is available at all major bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Target, as well as my website, The Real Dana Frank. And that's my handle as well on Instagram. And the book, again, is Get Up, Get On It, Black Entrepreneurs' Lessons on Creating Legacy and Wealth.
Well, it's been fantastic to speak to you. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate it so much.
Well, thanks to Dana for her enlivening conversation. And if you enjoyed this episode, you might also enjoy episode 14 with Amelia Lynn, who is also driven as an entrepreneur to promote family values, but in quite a different way to Dana. You'll find more than 120 episodes in our back catalogue on subjects ranging from business and sports to the arts and social change. Just hop on over to accesstoinspiration.org to discover them all. Remember, you can keep connected with us on social media. We're on all the main platforms. And next week, my guest is former United Nations peacekeeper Urs Koenig, who will be talking about leading with humility. I hope you can join me then.